What's up, Tatsu? Hello. Whew. I'm up so early. For me, it's 7:30. I never get up this early. Hello, everybody. Uh, ZXY, Alan Wu. What's going on? Hello. Yeah, I actually would love to watch WREC, but like basically, my schedule makes this tough. I don't have a lot of good times to stream aside from right now, and I happen to get up early, so yeah, sorry. If you want to watch me and WRC at the same time, no problem. I won't hold it against you. What's going on, everybody? Hey, Trottles, Bro Muhammad, everybody. What's going on? 24-hour stream start? No. That's the 24-hour stream is gonna need to be for the 3.2 patch notes. They're so they're so long. I actually suggested to Alice Tiny Froggo that like she actually post the word count because when I was writing the systems and balance part of the patch notes, I was like, this is so long. I was like looking at how big our part is, and I was messaging Alice. I was like, this is so long. You could probably get the players hyped up about this just by telling them how many words are in here. And then she was like really excited to see if we could break 5K, and we ended up doing it. So that was cool. Let's see. You did amazing this patch. I'm sure the icons meta will be fire with these runes changes. You love to hear it. Your voice is a bit low. Yeah, I can try and. Unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do. I mean, I can talk louder, but I can maybe lower my desktop audio a little more to help the balance out. But there's not a ton I can do about it because my headset is just like quiet. Like that's just ultimately what it is. And I don't want to like push my computer's like I don't want to amp my mic up a bunch because then I've been told that leads to bad things. So sorry, apologies if I'm a little low. Cannot no, because I'm already maxed out on the sound mixer. Unfortunately, I'm already as high as I can go on all of the things that are allowable. Is lethal tempo same as PC that stack up to 6 and have attack speed? It is not exactly the same as PC. I don't actually know how much I'm allowed to tell people about the mechanics. I assume I can tell people like some clarifying things around like what we intended people to know from the video and what we like didn't intend people to know. Or I can probably clarify mechanics is my assumption, and if not, then hopefully I don't get any trouble for that. But it's like I assume there's nothing wrong with me telling people like generally this is how this stuff works. But yeah, Kraken Slayer deals true damage. Yeah, like if that wasn't clear, that was supposed to be clear in the video. Although maybe the pirate terminology may not have been 100% clear. But yeah, Kraken Slayer is true damage. Sound is fine. It feels you just woke up. Yes, I did just wake up. That's true. So I actually had my whole stream setup stuff. I actually had like I set all this up last night and then I went to sleep. So I was just like, all right, when I wake up, I'm just gonna stream. So this is when I got up. So this is when you're getting your stream. That's literally all there is to it. Let's see. Let's go 12 hours of stream. No, hopefully this will be a longer one because I can go until well. So there's two things. Number one, I do have people coming to my apartment to fix my ceiling, but they're not supposed to come here until after I'll need to be finished streaming anyway. So if they come early, I might have to cut the stream a little early. Number two, I do have to work today. There's a couple things I have to work on. There's some stuff. Well, I guess that doesn't have to be done today, but there's some stuff I have to get done between today and tomorrow that needs to be done by Monday. So there is some stuff that needs to be done, but I don't have any super early meetings at least, so I won't have to like cut myself off. Sup and sup. Yeah, what's going on? Let's see. I love the new additions. Good job. Love to hear it. I love to see. I have been absolutely hyped to see all the positive reactions to the 3.2 preview and stuff. Super awesome. Do you guys want Pyke to be support only, or would you like Pyke to be mid too? So here's our thoughts on Pyke as a champion, just very quickly. If Pyke is a balanced mid laner, or a worse, or more specifically, if Pyke is in mid lane a champion that is weaker support, or weaker than his support, or like reasonably balanceable in both roles, we have no fundamental problems with the champion unless he is doing some things that are fundamentally unhealthy in the role, right? If he is playing in very similar ways to PC and Wild Rift, that's probably a little more acceptable in Wild Rift. The problem that we might have here, similar to the problem that PC has had, is that if mid lane is significantly better than support, we would want to address that in a meaningful way. And so we do have a lot of the levers from PC in the same way that, like reduced minion damage, the abilities not dealing AoE damage or not dealing damage to minions or minions at all, etc. Right? Like, we have a lot of these similar levers because we do have concerns around mid lane being better. And the truth is that we want Pyke to be a good support. And if mid lane is limiting that because it's much stronger than support, we would just do away with it, right? Or at least we would try, right? Obviously, PC has taken a lot of stabs at this and had mixed success, so we'll see where that goes. Will Echo be viable in the jungle? That's the hope. Hey, Instep, we need to clear up what Maddie meant about Kraken Rune. Kraken does true damage. I can explain. I assume I can explain the mechanics of how these runes work. I won't obviously not be telling you numbers or anything like that. That's for the patch notes, but. Yeah, Kraken definitely does true damage. It's a true damage rune, and I'll explain the whole. I'll explain the whole story of how we got to these runes at some point, but I'll do that after 8. I'll do that after 8 so that people who got here at the scheduled time will receive the full story live if they want to. Let's see. Thanks for linking duo lane meta. No problem. I don't know what I did, but sounds good. After removing Charge Blade broken passive, can you guys bring back true damage? I don't think we'd really want to bring back the true damage. Like, not to say that it's out of the question, but I think we'd rather just buff the magic damage, honestly. I think the magic damage is probably a better direction for the thing, but I'm not super invested in the Charge Blade. Like, that's really something that I more lean on, like Rogue Fool and some of the other designers that worked on the item originally. I'm not super into it. It's I was involved somewhat in the rework because obviously the 50% crit version I think just didn't really work out that well. But I more lean on other people to tell me, to have better insight into what the purpose of the thing is or where we want its place to be. And I don't necessarily think having it have anti-tank properties is really where we want. I think the magic damage is actually good so that it doesn't have synergy with lethality. Can you tease the next patch about where we are going the next jungle meta? I will say there are other changes to the jungle in the next patch. We will see where we go, but the jungle will be changing a bit. But I cannot tell you what those changes are. But if you're a jungler, get ready for some more changes because that's what's coming. Let's see. You should see what Random is doing on Shen right now. It's disgusting. Oh, I love the. Let's see. Where's my hydrate emote? Actually, I love it. This emote is so good. Charge Blade is perfectly fine right now, Imo. Glad to hear it. Lethal Tempo got to add attack range? No. That is a mechanic I will clarify here. Lethal Tempo does not give you attack range. So I'll talk more about this later when I tell the whole story of runes and stuff, but the reason why Lethal Tempo doesn't have attack range, the short version here, I'll go into more detail later when I tell the whole story, but it's the short version is we have to be really sensitive about attack ranges. We did briefly test the attack range version, but we feel like we should be way more careful than that about long attack ranges in the game. So, not something that we're super likely to, not a direction that we're super likely to go down ever, and certainly not with Lethal Tempo. Will we be seeing healing and shielding amplifications item for support and shield reductions items soon? I mean, I can't tell you what'll be soon. It's both of those are on the table as potential options, but not something that's I could tell you when or if or when we'll ever do them. But it's I certainly really want to do Serpent's Fang for sure, and I think there's places for good heal and shield amp items in the system. Please nerf Viego. No problem. Viego in Wild Rift is super nerfed. He's so nerfed he doesn't even exist. Actually, can you tell me why the Gromp has a Rift Scuttler regen buff on PC? Probably we can have that on Wild Rift. Basically, that change in PC was to move some of the power of taking Rift Scuttler into taking your own jungle camps. I don't remember the exact context around why they wanted to do that, besides the fact that they just didn't want people to focus crab as like the scuttle crab as hard. I think there's a lot of different directions we could do, but I don't really think we care that much about putting the regen on Gromp, or like putting the recovery on Gromp specifically. But it's like, I do agree we could probably do a better job of making crab more about the vision, like the map and the vision control, rather than about the personal rewards you get for taking it. It's like, I kind of agree there, where it's like the recovery does feel a little off. Since Echo is from Zaun, can we assume we're not going to have another Zaun champion in 3.3? No idea. Literally, I don't even know. I don't even know where some of these champions are from. So like, I do know who the I do know like what champions are coming out when, like in the next, you know, in the most recent patches. But it's like, obviously I can't tell you that. Like, just don't even ask. Is Kraken Slayer as Rune will stop you making exclusive on-hit items? No. Again, as I've said many times, like, generally my team is not very interested in Rageblade. They're quite opposed to Rageblade, so it's like, I don't think that item is likely, but I think an on-hit capstone item is possible. Will you buff stealth champs since pink wards are being added? No. If they show up, if they surface as being underpowered after pink wards, which I very much doubt will be the case, then we'll buff them, but that is very unlikely. Where's Roguefool? Did he make changes on the 3.2 Elemental Rift? Roguefool is the owner of Elemental Rift, but we didn't even really talk about having him on for the 3.2 stream, because the focus here is going to be runes, right? Both for here and for the patch notes review. I think the focus is going to be on the runes, which is my system, right? Like, I made both these keystones. I made 3 of the minor runes, and Zekroman made the other 3, but like there was a lot of collaboration between us for the minor runes, and both the keystones are things that I owned. So I figured I would do these solo and see what happened. So yeah. Let's see. Can you add what runes are being used in spectate mode? No idea. Probably not, considering you can't see what runes you're using, so it seems unlikely anytime soon. What is the place of mages in the game right now? I feel like we need magic items. There's very little choice for mages we can go for. We do want to add, so I think the 2 things we want to do at some point are like, there's clearly a missing haste item. I've talked about this before, but it's like, haste is, like, there's no, like, slot, like, haste item slot, right? It's like, so that's tough. And like, obviously we could do something about that, and it's like, we could probably make some other improvements to the mage item system. I think like Soul Stealer is basically like not a real like not an item that gets used by very many people, even though it's good. So it's like, we could probably do something about that to make that a more appealing, like broadly appealing item. Is Thresh a ranged champion? Yes, he has a ranged auto attack. He's ranged. Have you changed the runes page layout, or it's the same? There are some small changes to the UI. I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's mostly, it looks pretty much the same. Congrats on Demolish. Thank you very much. My work here is done, by the way. I've gotten Demolish and Wild Rift. It's time for me to retire. Let's see. Are the new runes going to replace current runes or add to them? It is just additions at this point. There were some discussions, and again, I'll talk about this more when I go through the whole story. But the runes, we were originally planning on doing some replacements. It ended up that we had so many rune designs that we were actually excited about, and enough implementation budget that we could make all the minor runes we wanted, that we just decided to just add 6 minor runes and 2 keystones. So that's where we ended up, right? It's like, we were originally talking about doing some replacements, right? And then that's something that could still happen in the future. But it is something that we were talking about as like, hey, let's replace some runes in addition to the keystone, and then it kind of, everything kind of exploded from there, which is cool. Thank you for working the rune system. Really appreciate the runes in Wild Rift. Love to hear it. Will Mastermind and Phase Rush gone away? One day, I hope so, but not today, or in the immediate future. Let's see. Sorry, it is hard for me to keep up. Let's see. Clear visual indication for enhanced Varus Q after W would be nice. I agree, that would be nice. How are you going to nerf the Ultra Giga Broken Lethal Tempo Jungle Teemo? I'm just going to let that be broken. I'll be playing it, you know? I'm going to be in there on the Jungle Teemo with Lethal Tempo. I mean, if it's, if it's good, I'll be in there. I'd definitely be interested in trying it out. Seems unlikely it'll be very good, though. I will say something that hopefully no one will. Hopefully, don't get me in trouble for this, but I will tell you, uh, Kraken Slayer does have an AP ratio on it. It's not just an AD. It's not just bonus AD. I put an AP ratio on it. So, you know, if you want a Teemo Kraken Slayer or Kayle Kraken Slayer, get on in there. Get on in there, my dudes. I slapped an AP ratio on there for all the Kales and the Teemos of the world. Let's see. Notice Demolish is a blue rune. Interested to see how it competes with Mastermind for splitting. There will be Mastermind changes in the same patch, so there will not be as much direct competition as you might think. Are any runes being replaced or removed? Are all these additions and please Ahri rework? There are a lot of people internally that also want the Ahri rework, so don't worry. You know, again, that's not my team. The Champions team would do the Ahri rework, so they definitely are aware people want it. But as far as the runes being replaced, these are all just additions at this point. Not to say that we won't be doing replacements in the future, but these ones are just additions, and the only significant changes here are going to be to existing runes are going to be to Mastermind. Well, that may not necessarily be true. There might be other changes to runes, but like in terms of like, you know, completely revamping what the rune does, or maybe not completely, but we'll save that for the patch notes. Does Lethal Tempo proc on champions only like Conqueror? Correct. It is champions only. Our keystones, generally speaking, are restricted to champions, just like our Kraken Slayer in Wild Rift is champions only. So to be clear about this, Kraken Slayer does not work on minions like it does in PC. So it's champions only. Any update on India release? No. This is not the place to ask about India release. Ever. So, no. As a mono team, I feel happy to know the Kraken Slayer will have an AP ratio. Thanks. Love to hear it. Yeah, but I mean, I was really like, basically the reason why I put it there, and I'll talk about this a little bit, like before I get into the full story here, is just the reason why I got the AP ratio was kind of like, hey, you know, I think Lethal Tempo will generally be better for Kayle and Teemo. I was like, that was my suspicion, right? So I think Kale's like maybe a little interesting to potentially go for, or it might be, you know, there might be situations where Kraken Slayer is better, and maybe it'll be better overall, right? It's like I didn't do a lot of extensive testing. I did play Kayle in testing with both Lethal Tempo and Kraken, and I had a hard time figuring out which one was better. But it's like the reason why I put the AP ratio there was like, why not, right? Like what about it is like, what about the rune is stopping me from making it? It's like if it's OP on Kayle and Teemo, I can always just nerf the AP ratio, right? It's like, so it just seems to me like a better version of the rune if it has an AP ratio where it's like we do have a few, you know, like AP attacking champions that could maybe use this rune if I put an AP ratio on it, right? It's like there's nothing fundamentally wrong with giving those champions Kraken Slayer. Will the new runes be different for melees? Kraken Slayer currently has a ranged, or sorry, Lethal Tempo has a ranged melee split. Kraken Slayer does not. I am open to adding one if it needs it, but it is not something that's currently in. No delete runes, right? There are currently no plans to remove any runes in... Well, there's no rune removal in 3.2. Should we see Crown of the Shattered Queen or that Reflective Helm already replacing Crown at Wild Rift? Not right now. Something we're open to eventually, potentially. Don't you think Kraken Slayer will create the same problems release charge-related causes? No, we don't. There actually wasn't anything wrong, like, fundamentally with the fact that Charge Blade did true damage, right? It's like... That wasn't the reason. The reason why it was changed from true damage to magic damage wasn't because the true damage is fundamentally wrong. It was just this item does way too much damage, and also the fact that, you know, the 50% crit I think created some sort of conflating issues with the item that I think, you know, it probably could have, like, it could do true damage today, and I don't think that'd be a significant problem. I think it's probably better that it does magic damage, but I don't think that's a fundamental problem with the item. It was just kind of weird to have true damage on that item in a system, like in our caster system, I think was probably wrong. But that doesn't, like, that wasn't like fundamentally like terrible for the game or anything like that. It wasn't like fundamentally unbalanceable. It was like just, it probably wasn't the right place for true damage. But it's like, doesn't mean we couldn't go back to true damage in the future if we had a slightly, like, if we wanted to, you know, make that an anti-tank item, or we didn't want caster champions to have to buy Lord Doms or something like that, or sorry, not Lord Doms, Mortar Reminder or something like that, right? Sorry, I was playing some PC League last night and I was buying a Lord Doms and I was like, wow, this item is really insane. How does Kraken damage work? Is it true? And what is the damage? Kraken Slayer's true damage. Kraken Slayer shouldn't be to melee champions, right? There should probably be some melee champions that want Kraken Slayer. And if they don't, then I'll buff it for them. Like, to be clear about this, it's like, I'm not 100% confident in all of the numbers that I've put in, right? It's like, you know, if the numbers are wrong, then I'll change them. So, you know, if it needs a melee mod, I will give it one, to be clear about this. Like, just straight up, it doesn't currently have one, and if it needs one, there will be one in the future. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with the chat. Is Gangplank's barrel mechanics, specifically his E, able to port to Wild Rift? Yeah, I think there's potential for that. If the AP scaling are reasonable, then it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a pretty reasonable ratio. That's my opinion, though, and I did make it, so maybe my opinion is not good. Or it's just, you know, invalid. Will Loyalty Rune disappear in 3.2? No. I would like it to, but it won't. I don't personally love it, but you aren't watching EU finals? Hey, who's to? I have 3 monitors. Who's to say it's not on one of them? You don't have any evidence that I'm not watching the EU finals right now. Wasn't better to bring Kraken as item? No. There's no real reason. There's no motivation for us to bring the Kraken as an item, right? It's like we don't have the mythic system, and Kraken is really only useful as a mythic. Like, not to say that we couldn't make a non-mythic version, but it's like that passive, like the passive doesn't really have much, like there's not really a place for that, that passive in our current item system for 80 carries. So if it's not a keystone, there's not really a place for it as an item, I don't think. Kraken Slayer Shiv sounds fun. Yes, that was one of the things, that was the first melee we tested it on when we had it in testing, except at the time it was bugged and it didn't work correctly, and I was furious. So, because I was the one playing the Shyvana and it did not work on the Twin Bite. So, yeah, that was unfortunate. But it should be fixed. At least last I tested it, it worked. So it should work on live unless we ship the wrong version, which hopefully we didn't do. Vayne plus Kraken Slayer will double true damage. Yeah, that'll be true damage on the... I mean, it won't literally double your true damage. I mean, they both have separate values, but yeah, you can do that if you want. I suspect Lethal Tempo will be significantly better for Vayne, right? But yeah, you can run Kraken Slayer on Vayne if you want. Ultimate Shield spammable on Corki. Ultimate Shield has a cooldown, which I think should have probably been clear in the video, but yeah, it does have a cooldown. It's not a super high cooldown currently, so it's probably not terrible on Corki, though I'm not convinced it's actually that great. Like, we tested it, we ran it in tests on Corki, and we were like, well, it's kind of hard to control when you get the shield, right? Because you just want to use your rockets on Corki, and since it has a cooldown, that means the shield isn't really available, like, you know, oftentimes when you need it. So I'm not actually sure if it's better on Corki than stuff like Nullifying Orb, honestly. But, you know, if that turns out to be good, then I have no problem with that. But I'm willing to tune the cooldown if it's, you know, to tune the cooldown up if it's a problem. Let's see. What are your datas about Diana? I mean, Diana is a good mid laner and a good jungler. That's what the data says. In pretty much every MMR. Actually, and when I say pretty much, I mean literally every MMR. Diana is good in both jungle and mid. So, if you feel like jungle is bad, that one's on you. She definitely wins games. Scorch is an early game rune, right? Yes. So Scorch is an early game rune. There is some overlap with Brutal for sure, and that is an area we want to improve. We were potentially discussing some Brutal changes in 3.2. They didn't end up working out. We'll see. Maybe we might revisit those in the future to make sure there's less overlap for early game runes. But for Scorch, generally we have mathed it out such that if you are hitting your spells in the early game, Scorch should be pretty significantly better than Brutal. If you're just hitting spells like on a rough, like on the cooldown of Scorch or close to the cooldown of Scorch, Scorch will still be significantly better, right? Because it is quite a bit of damage, right? Brutal is, you know, even if your ability was 1-to-1 with AP, right? Brutal is giving you 14 damage, I believe it is. It's 14 AP, I believe. And then, Scorch at level 1 is 15 damage, right? So if you're interacting on Scorch's cooldown, Scorch literally does more damage, even if your ability is 1-to-1 with AP, which basically no poke spells are even close to that, right? So even if you hit like 2 poke spells on a 0.4 ratio, Scorch at level 1 actually does more damage than if you hit 2 spells per Scorch cooldown, right? If you hit like 2.4 ratios. So Omnivamp items when? Omnivamp's not like a forbidden stat for us. I mean, we have the boots, right? So nothing wrong with it. W has a lot of throw range too. Yeah, we actually lowered the throw range on the balance side of things for Echo. It was really long. I'm not sure if they recorded the video when it was like really long range or not. I'd have to check, but it is something that we did lower, and I think we could even maybe go a little bit harder on lowering the range as well. We'll see if that works out. It's like that's a range I think we could pretty easily tune after launch. It's like most ranges I'd be pretty skeptical of like changing them after launch, but that's a range I could see us touching after launch for sure. Hello? Opinions on roving AZ stats and lifesteal making it full-fledged mage item. Oh, are you talking about Gunblade? I think replacing Gunblade with Riftmaker or making a version of Gunblade that is just a mage item, or like just not it doesn't have AD on it, probably makes a lot more sense than what we currently have. Yeah. Should one day we see another tree called Legends Rune and the rune coming from Precision Rune? It's not out of the question. I don't know if we're ever, I don't think we're very likely to add a whole other tree, but it's not out of the question of something that we could do if we felt like we had good options for it. The Legends runes are stuff that we've talked about in terms of like Legend Alacrity is one of the ones I think probably discussed the most in terms of like, hey, do we want to have an attack speed minor rune somewhere? So stuff we've talked about, not something that we have any solid plans for at the moment. But it's definitely something we're open to potentially adding. Can Nautilus function on other lanes? We've seen some success in our tests as a jungler and as a Baron laner on top of support. We'll see how it works out, because I think we'd be happy to see him in honestly any of those roles. We just want to make sure that he's a good support. Kind of similar to Pyke, it's like, hey, if the other roles are limiting him because they're so much more powerful, that would be a problem. But it's like, if he's just good in those other roles, we'd be totally fine with that. Does that mean you guys going to buff the old, less impactful runes such as Brutal, Loyalty, etc.? We're really not going to buff Brutal. That's not happening. But I think other rune buffs are potentially on the table. We will in the first, like our current plan, right? No guarantees that this is what's going to happen. But it's like my plan, because I haven't cleared this with my team or anything, but it's like my plan for the A patch, for the 3.2 A patch, is to do a pass on all the runes, go across the board with balancing, and just say like, let's just like level these out. Like, let's just get these as close together in power as we can. So 3.2A will probably be a somewhat big patch in terms of systems, assuming that my team lets me do that, right? It's like no guarantees they will, but it's like, that's my current plan. Did someone say Jungle Knot? Yeah, I mean, it seemed fine in our test. I never played it. I actually didn't play a single game of Jungle Knot, I don't think, but it seemed fine playing with it and against it in our tests. Can we have more loadouts? I want to have more choices in my builds. That could be something we could do. I could see us adding like an empty loadout or something like that for everyone. I don't really know how that system works at all, so I have no idea how costly that would be or anything like that. Does Kraken Slayer damage proc on auto attacks only or auto attacks only? It does not interact with abilities at all, including on hit abilities, by the way. Well, there is a weird interaction currently with on hits because of the way our system works, but we're talking about changing that system so that it's more consistent. But I'll talk about that more, like probably when it comes out or like on the patch notes. That's like kind of getting into the details of like how our auto attack system works, which is kind of weird. It has some like weird edge cases. Don't you think a tank's already being a little squishy? The constant of adding HP percent damage, blah blah blah. No, we don't have any problems with tanks, right? It's like look at tanks in the current game, right? Like Shen, Malphite, Gragas, right? And even discounting AP Gragas and AP Malphite, like when we look at those tanks and I look at champions like Amumu and Rammus, it's like, I think when I look at mainline tanks, right, like disregarding the support tanks for a second, because I'll talk about them next. It's like when I look at the tanks, I look at those champions and I say, these tank builds are actually like strong, like good, like either passable to strong right now, and I say that like systemically adding options to counter them is really not something that I think is fundamentally a problem, right? Uh, when I look at a Amumu and Rammus and I hear people tell me that they're terrible, what I hear there is like either number one, that player's really good and they're not in the MMR where those champions are at their best, and I'm like, it's okay if those champions aren't great for you. And if you aren't a higher MMR player and you're telling me that Rammus and Amumu are bad for you, you're just wrong, right? Those champions are really strong in lower MMRs as tanks. And it's like, and they're kind of intended to be like, you know, good easy champions to pick up that might not be the best for skilled players. And like, to be clear, it's like, that's not necessarily saying we shouldn't address some of the skew between them, because I think Amumu in particular, his skew is really large and we would like to address that. But it's like, you know, it's not like it's unacceptable. The support tanks, I think, do have an issue where all of our support tanks have an issue in Elite where they fall off really hard in terms of win rate. That is something we've been talking about recently, we want to address, but I don't have like a, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, they're fundamentally like unplayable or anything like that. They just, like, their win rate just falls off in Elite, some, like pretty much all of them by a margin, by a decent margin. I think at this point, Blitzcrank and Braum are the two that don't fall off that hard. And Blitzcrank is partially probably due to the overdrive changes, where he was by far the sharpest in terms of fall off in Elite, and so we addressed that specifically with the change, and that made him fall off a lot less steeply in Elite than the other tank supports. But all of them do fall off in our highest MMR bracket, and that is something we want to do something about. Hey, Instep, were you watching the live stream patch preview? I actually was in a meeting. I was actually so mad. I had a meeting overwriting the patch preview. I wanted to watch it live, but I had a meeting at that time. So I was just like stuck in this meeting, just like talking about, you know, upcoming content. It wasn't even 3.2 stuff. So it was like about 3.3 stuff. So I was in a meeting during the live patch preview. So unfortunately I did not get to watch it live. So no, I didn't see that. Kraken Slayer stacks on you, not on them. So it's not like Vayne W or Vayne, you know, Silver Bolts, whatever you want to say. The Kraken Slayer stacks go on you, not on the enemy. So you can like attack an enemy 2 times and then attack an enemy a 3rd time, like a different enemy, and Kraken Slayer them. How did you guys solve the problem of getting more runes? Okay, I will here. I'm gonna put a line address. Did I say 4.3? I meant 3.3. If I said 4.3, my apologies. So I'm gonna like get through this. Okay, will Echo be released at the same time? I can't talk about that. I don't think. I can't talk about like when the champions are coming out. I don't think that's a champs thing. I definitely don't think I'm supposed to talk about that. Let's see. I don't think tanks are terrible. If they would have terrible win rate. That's not the case. What I'm talking about, team fight being blow up 100 to 0, even more than PC, leaving less time to counter interact in all plays before you die too fast. If that's common sentiment, like if that was a common sentiment that I had seen more commonly, or that was something that came through in our surveys, that would be something we would be looking into. But generally, I don't believe we really find that to be the case. That like tanks die too quickly, if that makes sense. Like tanks are supposed to die fast late game, by the way. I think part of the issue here I could see, or like part of the argument here I could see, is like people get to their full build too quickly, which means that tanks get to the point where they get cut down really fast, too fast. Or so that I could see being a good argument for like, this feels bad about tanks. And I could see that being an argument as to like, hey, why do people feel like tanks are bad? Or like one contributing reason as to why people feel like tanks are bad is that people do get gold and items really fast in Wild Rift. And that is something we've talked about. Like, do people get items too fast, right? Like, do we actually have too much gold in our systems? And is that why people feel bad about, like, is that a contributing factor of why people feel bad about tanks? Because it is true that like, as people acquire items, tanks are supposed to die faster and faster as the game goes on, right? Tanks are supposed to be a mid-game class, like generally speaking, where they spike in the mid-game where they have very, very hot, like, you know, very, you know, long time to kill. And then as people buy things like Mortal Reminder, Cyrilda's Grudge, Void Staff, etc., as people complete out their builds, the tanks are supposed to die so that the game can end in the late game. It is possible those items come in too fast, right? And that's part of the reason why I am the one who nerfed Mortal Reminder in the early game and stuff like that, because those like Mortal Reminder and Cyrilda's Grudge were just coming in like as too powerful too early in the game, and that's why I nerfed them, right? Like, it's possible that I've not done enough there, right? Like, I could see that being true. Uh, I don't know if it's me or Twitch, but stream's buffering. I don't see any problems on my end, but if anyone else has that problem, please let me know. Do you think there will be more squishy champions in the meta because of the new resolve runes in 3.2? We'll see. I mean, we definitely have given some new options here. So I'm very interested to see where the options go. I don't feel very confident in predicting exactly what will happen with the meta, though. So we'll see. Can we put chat into sub only so you don't have to follow chat for a while? I could see doing that. I don't actually even know how to do that. But it is definitely tough for me to keep up. Can you rework the golds and XP the players win without last hit? Freeze a lane or crush a wave under perk has no impact. We definitely have talked about reducing passive experience in gold. No news on that area right now, but it's like something that we've definitely talked about. I don't think this is your job, Ensa, but but you can hold the top left champion icons to see that players POV, but it's in a really awkward spot to hold, and it would be really nice if we could move it to on the UI and easily look at. I can talk to the UX people about that. Like, we've been talking about a few changes with the UX people recently. That is something I could definitely bring up to them. I agree. It is in an awkward spot, so that is something I will bring up to. I think he goes. I think on Reddit he's one of the guys on Reddit who's been commenting a lot recently. I think is like, it's like Riot Boards or something like that. Is the main UX guy for my team, or well, he basically participates in a lot of the different pods around, so like systems balance, champions, etc. So I'll have a conversation with him about it. I could definitely see that being something that could be improved. What is the cooldown to Scorch, and can it be proc on multiple targets? It cannot be proc on multiple targets, and if you want to see the cooldown, you're going to need to wait for the patch notes. Is there any plan for an auto decline surrender so we don't even see the surrender tab? There's definitely not a plan for that. Well, I shouldn't say definitely. I don't know what the other teams are working on. I think it's unlikely there's a plan for that, but not really my area. Pretty good that this patch is a month before so we can see new stuff. Yes. That is part of, I believe that is part of the reason why Icons is at the time that it is because it is situated between two patch timers, right? So I believe that was part of the plan all along, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a part of a lot of those esports discussions, so I'm not 100% up to date on all that stuff. Would you foresee Wild Rift following the LoL PC changes to reduce overall damage? We already have those changes, right? It's like our champions already have, like we already have much slower time to kill than PC is as it is. If in the future we feel like generally it is the case that damage is too high, which we don't currently think is the case, then we would be okay with following like similar plans, especially if they work well for PC. But it's like, we already have slower time to kill than PC, so it's not like we, need to do the same thing, right? That would make us like, we're already slower in terms of, time to kill on average. And not that I'm saying this is like the sole reason or anything like this, but it's like, I am sure that a contributing factor to PC, doing their time to kill changes to like their durability changes for slower time to kill was being able to see Wild Rift from release having a lot of success with slower paced fights, right? Our champions just have more health than PC, right? We just have a little bit less we have a little bit less damage from runes and from items than PC, right? And that's a direction that they can see there. Oh yeah, I actually didn't even pay attention to my stop line. Okay, all right. I'm disregarding chat. I'm telling the rune story here. Let me, can I just put like text here? Hold on. Add source of text. Add a new source. Modifiable text. Add source. Let's see. Text. No questions. Me talk about runes now. Questions later. I'll make this bigger, don't worry. Can I have the background color be alignment, center. Done. Now let's just expand this. Oh, that's way too big. That, wow. How do I... Oh, I see. I need to put an enter in this, huh? All right, I need to put a line break. All right, here we go. It needs to be bigger. Look how competent I am. Look at this. Whoops. I say as I mess everything up. Here we go. All right. Boom. How's this? Woo! All right. All right. So let's talk about runes. All right. So let me tell the full story of runes, because I do want to tell this story. So some people, oh yeah, and for Maddie, I'll probably try and have her on sometime later after 3.2 launches. So probably like around 3.2b or so is I think when I'll ask her to come on. And it'll probably be some random weekend stream that's not like attached to a patch or something. But I want to have her come on when there's like champion stuff to talk about. Anyway, I'll talk about that later. Runes time. I need to stop getting distracted by the chat. So rune stuff. So some people will remember when I came on, like when I did my stream on, like one of my streams in January, I was talking about how the UI could only easily support one more keystone rune. And I've seen people, like a lot of people have asked me like, hey, what happened with the UI? Is the UI significantly changing? And the answer is no, right? So let me tell the whole story of like how this happened and like why I said that at the time and how that ended up not actually being true. Even though like that was what I had been told at the time by the UX people. By the UI people, I guess I should say more specifically, since this is a UI question, not a UX thing. So here's what happened, right? So we had been talking. So for a long time, we've had this like. So we have these sets of tickets about like dealing like when we identify there's like a significant problem in the game or like something that we definitely want to do at some point. We have this ticketing system where we have like these long-term tickets. So one of the ones we've had for a long time is. I forget what it said. It was like Conqueror dominance problem or like Conqueror pick rate issue or something along those lines around like we knew that at some point we wanted to address Conqueror. And we knew that the only way we could really do this in a good way was to add new keystone, like add a new keystone or more than one keystone to compete with Conqueror, right? Because currently the problem with Conqueror in the pre 3.2 version of the game is that it is a systemic load-bearing system for basically all sustained damage champions. Whether you are an auto attacker, a caster, ranged, melee, it doesn't matter, right? Conqueror is a load-bearing keystone for these champions, right? All of them. And that's why Conqueror was like 63% pick rate, right? It's like, if you're an AD carry, you probably take Conqueror. If you're a fighter, you probably take Conqueror, right? Even assassins, right? You know, we obviously had problems where it's like, because time to kill was so slow, Electrocute actually wasn't, you know, that as desirable in our systems in a lot of ways, which is one of the reasons why we buffed Electrocute. Also, it was just weak, right? So essentially what ended up happening here was we knew for a long time, right? And we've had this ticket on the board for quite a while, or it's not there anymore because it got turned into the like what was originally the lethal tempo ticket. We've had this ticket for a long time where we wanted to address this. And so we did some initial investigation at some point, I think last year, like later last year, we did some investigation on like, hey, what can we do to the rune system? Like we know we want to make some changes here at some point. And what ended up happening was we had this discussion with the UI people, and what they told us, their initial, like they kind of like off the top of their heads, their initial thought was like, we probably can't do more than one keystone rune without significantly revamping the UI. And so that's what I told people, because that was the information we were working with at the time, was like, okay, we can probably only do one keystone, right? Because the UI people are telling us it would be really expensive to rework the UI, and it's not impossible that we could do that, but it's like we've been working with we've been trying to work with like somewhat limited resources here, right? Where design has been restricted because we don't have a ton of designers. We don't have a ton of resources every patch to just like do whatever we want. And so, because of all of that, we've been running into some running into some assumptions where it's like, hey, look, if something is really, really expensive, it's like probably better to put that time somewhere else because there's lots of systems that we can improve, right, on systems and balance. So that was kind of our thought at the time, was that if it's really expensive, we'd rather spend that effort elsewhere. Not that we couldn't have done it at the time, but that we just think that time would better be spent elsewhere. If we wanted to put the UI people on something, it'd be better to put it on like Elemental Rift, for example. Sorry, really thirsty. So here's what ended up happening, right? We decided for 3.2 we wanted to finally do this, right? We're like, okay, new keystone for auto attackers. That was our plan all along. It was like, okay, we're gonna do a new keystone for auto attackers. And this was given to me. They were like, all right, hey, you know, Nick, you're gonna go over here and you're gonna design this new keystone. You know, let us know what you come back with, and then we'll sort of scope out like what else we can do for the patch, right? It was basically determined from the very beginning. Okay, we're gonna do a keystone. We're not sure what else we can do in the patch. We got to scope that out, like see what our resourcing looks like, see how much we can get in terms of engineering and art resources, etc. But we always knew there was going to be an auto attacker keystone here. So I start working on designing this rune, which originally I pitched Hail of Blades. That was my original version of the system, where we do Hail of Blades, or my idea was, hey, Hail of Blades can be really good in Wild Rift because, and I've talked about this on stream quite a bit, where PC's Hail of Blades doesn't actually work the way that people think it does, right? The way that PC's Hail of Blades works is you auto attack a champion, and then your next 3 auto attacks after that have the attack speed, right? It presents itself as a 3-hit attack thing, but it's actually 4, right? Because you have to attack them once to get the attack speed, because PC doesn't know what you're attacking when your windup starts. So it can't actually get the attack speed, or it can't give you the attack speed until after you've executed your first attack, right? So essentially in Wild Rift, because we do know what you're attacking before your windup starts, we could make Hail of Blades better in that it actually works on your first 3 attacks against a champion. And we could only make it work against champions, unlike PC, again, where there's like some weird optimizations around like attack a champion and then, you know, use the AS on the minions or whatever. Some weird stuff around that. Anyway, so my original pitch was Hail of Blades, actually. However, there were some concerns, like pretty quickly when I pitched the Hail of Blades initially, there were some concerns around like, hey, are we confident that this actually hits Conqueror's pick rate really meaningfully? And so there were some discussions around this. You know, I went back to the shop to like see like how confident could I be in like getting Hail of Blades, etc. And essentially we end up deciding on, okay, let's do lethal tempo of some kind. Then there's a huge start of a debate around what the max stack paradigm is. And while that's going on, we get some of our information back about like scoping stuff. And like what we end up deciding is like, okay, let's start doing some minor rune stuff, right? So we start working on minor rune stuff, which is pretty cool. And originally we're talking about, hey, do we want to rework Brutal? Do we want to replace Champion? Do we want to replace Mastermind? Or, you know, rework Pathfinder, right? There are a lot of things on the table for stuff for us to change or potentially replace, like reworks and replacements. And we had a lot of pitches, right? We had a lot of really good minor rune pitches that we were excited about at this point. We were like, wow, Demolish, Scorch, you know, Nullifying Orb, Ultimate Shield, like Giant Slayer. There were actually a lot of runes that we were really excited about that we were like, these all look really good, and these all seem like they would work pretty well. So we have all these rune pitches on the table that we're really excited about. We're talking about, you know, what the max stack bonus on lethal tempo is supposed to be, and we go to the, you know, we go to the UI people while we're talking about resourcing, and we're like, hey, you know, it sounds like maybe we could we could just add some minor runes here. How does that look in the UI? And oh, by the way, we definitely want to do 1 keystone. Like, you know, is that going to be a problem? Because we know you scoped that out to say that wouldn't be that hard to make work. So the UI people get back to us pretty quickly, and basically what they say is like, hey, it's fine if you want to do 1 keystone, but by the way, after doing a more thorough investigation, we actually think that there's a way at pretty low cost that we could do 2 keystones if you want to do 2 keystones. So while we're talking about the Lethal Tempo max stack bonus, and this is like pretty late into the process where we need to get things locked pretty quickly, like we need to have like the design of things locked, or like not like literally the whole design, but like the general direction in which we want to go. The UI people tell us, hey, we could probably do 2 keystones without revamping the whole UI. And this causes us immediate scramble. We're like, do we have the resources to make a second keystone? Can we make a second keystone? Do we have like the art resources? Do we have the engineering resources to make something as a second, like to make a second keystone, right? So immediate scramble. And the immediate, like the answer we got back was like, yeah, we probably can, right? Like we have the resources to do this. We can do this for 3.2, right? But we need a design and we need it fast, right? And so we iterated through a bunch of different options. And of course, this is on me. And I came up with the solution that I think ended up, just people like internally at least really ended up liking, which was, what if we did Kraken Slayer as a keystone, right? Because I think a lot of people initially suggested, hey, let's do Press the Attack. We know that it has some use cases that are different from Lethal Tempo, right? Because there are champions in PC right now, for example, that take Press the Attack. And my initial thought is like, number one, I don't love Press the Attack. I think it has a lot of weird rules on it, and just like it's just like not very satisfying, or like not as satisfying as it could be. And my thought here was like, look, Kraken Slayer is a really good, like, it's very similar to Press the Attack, right? It's a 3-hit passive, but not having a cooldown and having this true damage gives it some really interesting, like, it gives it some really interesting context as to why you might want to use it over Lethal Tempo, right? Because it is essentially just your, like, on average, your auto attacks do more damage. For champions that have auto attack resets, for champions that have big attack speed steroids already, Kraken Slayer should be a really attractive option. And the intention here isn't that Kraken Slayer is just as popular as Lethal Tempo, right? We're expecting Lethal Tempo to be more popular than Kraken Slayer by a decent margin. But the intention is that for a champion like Tristana, who has a huge attack speed steroid, or potentially even a champion like Kayle, who has an attack reset, that Kraken Slayer would be really appealing for those champions. And I kind of expected some resistance to adding Kraken Slayer as a keystone amongst like people on my team and like adjacent to my team. But people just loved it, right? It's like when I pitched this as a keystone internally, is like it just went over so smoothly. It was like it was great because we needed to lock it, like the direction, really quickly. So I'm really happy with how the process turned out, and it's like I've been really happy with how Kraken Slayer's played in our tests. So it ended up working out really well overall. So essentially, the way that Kraken Slayer worked out is like, I think from time that I was told we had a space available to do a second keystone to locking the design, or locking the direction of the design, was like, I think like 5 days, something like that. But I've been really happy with it. It tested really, really well. It like feedback on it was really good, generally speaking. And yeah, overall, I'm pretty thrilled with how the keystones worked out. And yeah, like I was mentioning earlier, it's like it doesn't currently have a melee mod. It might need one. My team, kind of was like a little suspicious of the melee mod, so I didn't add it initially, but I will put it in later if it's necessary. Like if we don't see like champions like Shyvana taking it, which I think she probably should, then I'm totally open to a melee mod. Anyway, we'll see how that works out. So back to the Lethal Tempo stack bonus and the minor runes, because like Kraken Slayer was very smooth, right? It's like from the point where I was told, please make a second keystone, or like put in designs for a second keystone, that was like pretty much smooth sailing across the whole way. So the minor runes and Lethal Tempo, to sort of finish the rune story here, the max stack bonus on Lethal Tempo was quite a debate, right? Lots of people wanted range. It's very similar to PC. It's understandable. Like it's clearly powerful, right? It's like it feels good. But there were a lot of concerns about range around some issues that we've had around attack range in the past, especially persistent attack range, where because the screen size in Wild Rift is much smaller than PC, right? The percentage of the game that you see and like the percentage of things that you see, like how far away your field of view is, much more restricted in Wild Rift than it is in PC. We have had some issues internally and also even externally with Senna and things like this, on live, around really long attack ranges, right? And so we're very sensitive about this stuff, about like certain levels of attack range are just too long, like that you can be hit from off your screen or at the very edge of your screen, which is number one, a really frustrating experience, and number two, a really, really confusing experience. So essentially what we ended up doing here was we did test the attack range very briefly. We found the same issues that we kind of expected to see. And so the agreed upon solution here was additional attack speed, right? It gives you an additional attack speed steroid at the max stacks, which does two really good things. Number one, it's something that's really feelable. It feels really good, and you can sort of feel when you go to like, you have this like slow ramping effect. You have this like, okay, I'm lethal tempo, and then it's like this big jump when you hit max stacks. It's like, oh, I'm lethal tempo now. Like, I'm smacking them now. So in terms of satisfaction, I think it gives us some really good wins there where there is a jump on max stacks. And the second thing I think that it does that's really good for us that I really like about having the additional attack speed for the max stacks is that it allows us to give even, like, because it's the rune is really focused on giving one particular stat, it allows us to open up new potential builds for certain champions where currently on live, for example, it's like a champion like Draven's, like you probably need to build an attack speed item at some point, even though you don't really want to, right? So the champion's like primarily AD scaling. It's like we've seen a lot of success in testing on champions like Draven and Caitlyn. You take lethal tempo and then you go for these really high AD builds, like these really heavy AD builds that like don't even build Zeal items, right? It's like you can completely forego Zeal items, and the way that this interacts with the item system is, in my opinion, really cool and interesting, where it opens up new potential build paths for a number of champions. And so that's kind of where we ended up with the max stack bonus being attack speed. I do think it is possible the max stack bonus is a little bit too much right now, but we'll see how it works out. So we'll see. But yeah, so that's kind of how we ended up on the attack speed. There were some other things tossed around. I will say one of the things that people were interested in was at max stacks, your on hits trigger twice every X attacks, kind of like Rageblade from PC. That is something people were interested in, but not something we decided to go with. There were some other cool bonuses tossed around. Roguefool had some interesting ideas as well. Some stuff that might get added to some other systems in the future. Some like kind of interesting, cool ideas that I probably shouldn't talk too much about. But yeah, that was kind of what we were thinking for the purposes of like the max stack bonuses. It just ended up being, I think, best to just go with a simple thing that it's really feelable, it's really noticeable, and can potentially improve build diversity for champions taking it. So the minor runes. Let's go back to the minor runes. So at this point, again, shortly before lock, at the point where I was told we have space for a second keystone, and we were looking at all these minor runes where we were like, okay, we have space for, we have like implementation budget for probably like some number of these. We weren't sure how many, but we were thinking we probably only have space in the UI for around 3 of these. So we were originally talking about, hey, let's just do three minor runes. And so that was originally going to be Scorch, Ultimate Shield, or it wasn't, we weren't sure about the Resolve rune yet. It was like, we're pretty confident we're going to do Scorch. We're probably going like as an early game, like caster option. We weren't sure what we were going to do for Resolve yet. And for Inspiration, we were talking about, one of either Nimbus Cloak or Demolish, right? So